Hey, what's up, everybody? This is the Helpful Hacker, and today we are going over the SOC Fundamentals room from TryHackMe. So we'll jump right in and get started with task number 1, Introduction to SOC. So basically, if you don't know, a SOC stands for a Security Operations Center, and the best way to describe it is here it describes it as a dedicated facility operated by a security team to continuously monitor an organization's network and all their stuff for basically 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all year round. So that's the idea. It does say a dedicated facility. That's really not true. There are some SOCs that can totally be ran remotely, like none of the actual SOC employees work in the facility. There are SOCs that exist where everybody works in different parts of the world, but they're all working off of the same seam, or and we'll talk about what that is later, but they're working on the same stuff as if they were all in the same room together, but they're not. So it's really not a facility. I would say it's more the specialized security team portion is what really makes up a SOC. And what it does is it monitors an organization, monitors the network, its assets, and anything else that they need monitored from a cybersecurity point of view. And it does that 24 hours a day. So that's what a SOC is. We're going to talk about a few different things. We're going to talk about building a baseline for a SOC. They're going to mention that detection and response, the role people, processes, and technology plays. And then there's kind of a fun little practical exercise at the end. So what does SOC stand for? That's going to stand for Security Operations Center. So that's an easy one. Submit that. And with that, you're done with task number 1. Now it's on to task number 2, purpose and components. Okay. So what's a SOC for? Again, it's for that 24-hour monitoring for an organization. And it's monitoring to detect and respond to anything that happens, right? So if a company starts getting hacked, the idea is because you have a SOC, they should detect that and then respond to it really quickly. So that's the hope, is you have detection and response. And what are they going to detect? Detecting vulnerabilities, detecting unauthorized activity, or detecting policy violations. So this doesn't just have to be, it also down here it says detecting intrusions. You can read through all this, but basically I think you get the idea. It detects hacking, if someone's trying to hack or break in or steal something or exfiltrate data, a SOC is supposed to catch that. But what it also catches is, like here it says policy violations. So if a company has certain rules and maybe you're technically not hacking the company, but maybe an employee is, breaking those rules in a sense, or sending certain documents to a printer that they shouldn't be sending to a printer, and the employee might not even know that, your SOC can kind of detect those things for you. So it doesn't just catch hackers, it also just helps keep employees of a company more security aware, because if they accidentally start doing anything, then the SOC should also catch that. And then the response. So once something actually does start happening, they have playbooks and there's specific steps that they take to analyze the incident. Or in this case, we'll call it an alert. That's kind of the term when you're in a SOC. Anytime something happens and it comes to a SOC, it's an alert. And if that alert turns into something that someone needs to do something about, then that'll be the response. Then they'll have to respond to that. So if someone is actively hacking your website, the SOC should detect that, and then they will respond, and they'll carry out, they usually have an incident response team that does a little bit more than just like level 1 SOC analyst, and they will actually respond and start isolating different parts of the network or different endpoints and doing all that. So that's the response part. But really this room mostly focuses on this detection half, which is what, like, entry level, if you're an entry level SOC, you're going to be doing a lot of the detecting, you're going to be doing the alert triage, and then people that maybe are a bit more experienced will be doing the response and actually isolating parts of the network or endpoints and doing forensic analysis on endpoints to try and, stop the spread of malware and determine how it got in, that kind of stuff. So that's what that is. And then down here, they talk about the 3 pillars: people, processes, and technology. So basically, that just means inside the SOC, those are kind of the things that you have. You have different processes that have to take place, and every SOC has them. They all might be slightly different, but fundamentally, they're kind of all the same. And then you have certain people, and there's kind of universal terms for that. There might be different companies. Again, a private company can do whatever they want. So they might change job titles, or they might change who has what responsibility. But at the end of the day, universally, there's certain job titles and responsibilities that most people, we all understand to mean the same thing. So, and we'll go over all the different people in a SOC. And then you have the technology, and the technology is going to be the actual, like the endpoint that you're working with, the network that you're on, the SIEM that you're working with. And if you don't know what a SIEM is, we'll define it here in a minute. But yeah, so that's what you need to know. The purposes of the SOC is to detect and respond. And there's 3 kind of fundamental parts of that detection and response process. And it's the people, the process, and the technology. So down to the questions. The SOC team discovers an unauthorized user is trying to log into an account. What capability of the SOC is this? This would be detection. And then what are the 3 pillars of the SOC? That's going to be what we talked about earlier: people, processes, and technology. So submit that. And with that, you have finished task number 2, purpose and components. So now we're going to talk about each component of the SOC. So first is going to be people. So again, like I said, they have this nice kind of flow chart, and this is pretty universal. Again, if you work at a specific, companies might do things slightly differently. Like sometimes here it describes what a SOC analyst level 1 does, or a level 2. And maybe at some companies, they don't even have, a level 2 really. Maybe their level 2 is more like a level 3. And so sometimes the responsibilities and stuff, they change, but generally speaking, this is kind of the chain of command for the SOC, right? You have the CISO, the SOC manager, which oversees the whole SOC. And then from lowest to kind of highest, you have the SOC analyst, level 1, level 2, level 3. And then you have security engineer and detection engineer. As far as like which one of those is higher up the chain, it really depends. It depends on what you're doing, what your company does, and what the responsibilities of each of these are. And sometimes a SOC analyst level 3 does both of these, right? So again, the names aren't really important. Just understand that inside a SOC, you have different levels. You kind of have a chain of command, and it might be slightly different at whatever company you work for, but there should always be that chain of command in those levels so that you can escalate things if you need to. So then down here, it's going to describe kind of their roles. Again, SOC analyst level 1, they're going to be doing mostly the detecting. They're going to be looking at usually a SIEM, and they're going to be going through alerts, doing alert triage. So you have different alerts, and then it's the SOC analyst level 1's job to look at all of those and decide, hey, can I take care of this? Do I need to pass it up to a level 2? Do I need to immediately reach out to my manager? Is it something really bad? That kind of stuff. And then as you go up the chain, you get more responsibility. So again, this SOC analyst level 3, that's higher level. They might be doing some containment, eradication, and recovery, right? Where they actually get to interact with endpoints. Maybe they're doing some like digital forensics stuff, that kind of thing. And then a security engineer, this is a pretty broad term, but here they're talking about it's basically going to work on security solutions and deploying those solutions for a company, right? That it works smoothly with their operations. And one of those operations would be the SOC. So security engineer associated with a SOC, I imagine that would be someone that helps, distribute the actual security solution. So if we get a batch of new computers, they might be the guy that actually puts the endpoint detection software on all of those computers and makes sure, hey, yes, we're getting logs from those computers to our SIEM, stuff like that. But anyways, that's a lot of detail. It's not all that important. What's really important is kind of just understanding this. Understand there's a chain of command, And if you're at the beginning of that chain, you're going to be doing a lot of detecting, a lot of grunt work, honestly. And the higher up that chain you go, the more responsibility and the more stuff you get to do. So now that we know that, we can come down here, answer the questions below. Alert triage and reporting is the responsibility of, and that would be the SOC analyst level 1. Now I'm going to be honest. If it took you guys a while to get this answer, I do not blame you because of the formatting with the parentheses. It took me forever because I kept on getting rid of the parentheses, and then I was like too short and the numbers just weren't matching up. So no sweat, but that's the answer. So you're welcome if that's why you got stuck here and found it. You probably knew the answer, you just weren't formatting it right. And then the next question, which role in the SOC team allows you to work dedicatedly on established rules for alerting solutions? So I didn't talk a ton about this, but detection engineer, they're going to be the people that are setting up the rules and the logic to actually determine, hey, what level alert is this and where does it go, right? Because that's all done by computers. So they're the ones that kind of get to work on that and set that up. So the answer to that is going to be detection engineer. Submit that, and with that, you are done with task number 3. Now it's on to task number 4, process. So I already kind of talked about alert triage, and I talked about how this is kind of the role of a level 1 SOC analyst. And basically what they do is they're going to get an alert to their dashboard, and then their job is to really kind of figure out these 5 things. This is what they should be asking themselves: who, what, where, when, why. And then they might write something up, and if they feel like it's not a problem, then they might just clear the alert and leave a note of explaining the who, what, when, where, and why, and then not a big deal. They just clear it because nothing bad happened. Or if something bad is happening, they're going to try and answer these questions as quickly as possible, get something written down, and then they'll probably escalate that to whoever the appropriate person is. So maybe if it's something and the SOC analyst is just like, this isn't a huge deal, but I don't know how to deal with it, I'm going to send it up to a level 2 SOC analyst. Or maybe it's like, oh my gosh, I think this is like exfiltration. I think people are currently encrypting all of our company's data for ransomware. Then you might push that all the way to your SOC manager or a level 3 or something like that. But this is what they do. They're going to get an alert, and then they're going to figure out the who, what, when, where, and why. And then they're going to decide, hey, how important is this and who do I need to give it to? And that whole process is just called alert triage. So that's what they're doing. And then they kind of give you an example of some questions. Malware detected on host George PC. So you want to figure out what there was malware, when was it detected, where it was on George PC, who the file was detected for the user, George. So it was on his PC, but it was from, and it's his. And then why, after the investigation, the file was downloaded from a pirated software selling website. So now we know why George did it. And then you make a report, right? And so, yeah, that's how that works. And then, like I said, the room doesn't talk a whole lot about the second half of the SOC, which is incident response and forensics. That's because TryHackMe has a lot of other good rooms on that. So, and that's kind of a separate thing. Like I said, SOC level 1, you're going to be doing this reporting detection. And then as you get higher up, you can do more of this incident response. So read through that. It's basically just saying, hey, they're going to do forensics and they're going to respond. They're going to remove the malware. They're going to isolate systems, keep the company safe, that kind of stuff. So now down to the questions. The SOC team found John had attempted to steal the system's data. Which W from the 5 W's does this answer? That's who, because they found that John was the one who was doing it. So that's who. And then the SOC team detected a large amount of data exfiltration. Which W from the 5 W's does this answer? That would be the what, right? Because they detected large amounts of data exfiltration. That's kind of what's happening. So mark those. And with that, you're done with task number 4. Now it's on to task number 5, technology. So again, it's going to talk about those 3 pillars. And then this is the technology portion. Now, I referred to a SIEM already, and it stands for Security Information and Event Management. And so they really should have put this first. It would have made my life easier because I've referred to it. So hopefully that's not confusing now that I'm defining it. But what it is a SIEM is a centralized location that all logs can go to. That's an easy way to look at it. It's a resource to see all of the logs from everything. Because think about it, if I work for a company and we have tons of computers, we have printers, we have the network itself that has been, segmented into several different networks. You have the actual, wireless networks and other things all in one building. Imagine a SOC analyst level 1 trying to manage all that from different log sources, right? If I had to go log into the firewall for each specific network segmentation to get the logs and look at them, that would be ridiculous. So what they do is instead they have all the firewalls, they have all of their endpoints. So all of their company computers, they take logs and they automatically send that to the SIEM, right? And then the security information and event management system is what the SOC works off of. It gives them one clean dashboard. And you know what? Actually, why don't I'm just going to show you kind of an example of what a SOC dashboard would look like. Images. Something like, I like this one. This one kind of looks cool. Oh, this is Excel dashboards. But either way, right, it would take, essentially what you're doing is you're taking all of the, instead of having to go onto each firewall and to do other stuff, you can just have it all in one place. And it will look something like this. This is an Excel dashboard. It's not an actual SOC dashboard, but I think you get the idea, right? And so that makes it way easier for the SOC to do their job, and everything is in one location, and they just go look at their dashboard and they go through all the alerts, and that's where they do their alert triage, they do their report writing there, all sorts of stuff. So that's I would argue that's the most important part of this SOC is the SIEM. And then the SIEM is getting all of its information from different places, right? And two of those devices or those technologies are going to be the EDR, or endpoint detect and response. So that'll be something that usually lives on the actual endpoint. So if I work at a company and they give me a computer to take home, on that computer, there's going to be some sort of EDR software to send all of my logs back to the SIEM. And then same thing with the firewall or the SIEM. I don't actually know. People call it SIEM. I've heard it SIEM, whatever you want to call it, but it is what it is. And then the firewall, that would be network security, and that's going to be the barrier between your network and like the internet. And so you want to see everything that's coming in, right? And the firewall is set up to automatically send all of its logs to the SIEM as well. And then there's other stuff you can look at. There's antivirus and intrusion detection systems, all sorts of stuff. And all of that will go into the SIEM so that the SOC analyst can work with it. So down to the questions, now that we kind of understand the technology involved in a SOC, the most important one being the SIEM or the SIEM, however you say that. So which security solution monitors incoming and outgoing traffic of the network? That would be a firewall. And then do SIEM solutions primarily focus on detecting and alerting about security incidents? Yeah, they do. Now there's other technologies that will do some of the response for you as well. Generally speaking, most SIEM solutions don't do the response. They do the detection, and then there's other things that people use for the response portion of that. So with that, we're done with task 5. Now it's on to task 6, practical exercise of the SOC. This one's kind of fun. So you get to be a SOC analyst for like a couple of minutes. So here's our scenario, right? Well, first we'll just view the site. That'll open this up. Okay, that's kind of lame. I'm trying to do this so that, basically so that I can open this up in a separate window because it looks a little bit better. but you know what? I'm just going to zoom out. I like to zoom in so people on their phone can watch my videos, but for this section, I'm just going to zoom out and hopefully they can kind of see it. So in this scenario, what we have is we're a level 1 SOC analyst and we receive an alert that port scanning activity has been observed on a host in our network. So we have access to the SIEM solution. So this is our SIEM, everything kind of in one place. And then we can see all the logs for this alert, and we're tasked to view the logs individually and answer the questions on the 5 W's given below. So they're going to ask us what, when, where, who, why, and then a couple of other things. So here, this is important. This gives you a lot of clues. This says, hey, the vulnerability assessment team notified the SOC team that they were running port scan activity inside the network from host 10.0.0.8. So that's going to be really important. Okay, so now back to this. I don't know if you saw it, but there was a little thing down here at the bottom that told you to accept or acknowledge the one open alert. So we have all these alerts, right? And they've already been closed. So somebody already looked at it, and it even tells us who looked at it. And it's from the SOC team. It tells you what was happening, and they closed it. So you can kind of see everything right from here, which is what I was talking about. So first it wants us to acknowledge to take ownership of the alert. So we'll take that alert, and it looks like there was port scanning activity from IP 10.0.0.8. Now, if you're paying attention, we can already see 10.0.0.8. That's the same thing, right? So what we'll want to do is we already accepted it. Now we'll investigate. It says down here, investigate this activity in the SIM. So now if we look, we can see the specifics. So destination port, source port, it looks like it's going to be the same. And our source is going to be this 10.0.0.8. And if we slide this over, oh, here we go. If we slide this over, we can see the names too. And so this is Nessus. Now, if you know, Nessus is a security tool that does scanning. So, and if we look at the port numbers, we can pretty much tell, hey, the vulnerability assessment team told us there was going to be port scanning, and this is what that looks like, because it's all coming from 10.0.0.8, and it's all going to this 10.0.0.3, and the destination port is the one that's changing, and it's doing 22, 53, 443, 21, 25, 143, 80, some pretty common ports that port scanner would want to look at, right? And they're all scanning Joe's PC. So you have Nessus, the security tool, scanning Joe's PC. And because it's from the correct IP address that they already told us about, everything looks good. So now we can answer the questions, right? And I think that's what it has. Yeah, answer the questions given in the task. So what activity triggered the alert? And that would be a port scan. And then when? So when did this happen? When did the port scan happen? And we have that date right there. So we can copy that, paste it in there, hit submit. And then the destination host IP address for most of this. Now, if you look, you can see at one point, Joe's PC responds to the scan on port 22. That's not abnormal or anything. A lot of times we have ports set up so that if anybody reaches out to them, they'll kind of respond with something. So that's not unusual. But for the most part, what we see here is we see Nessus is the source, and they're reaching out to Joe. And Joe's destination IP address is going to be this 10.0.0.3. And then what's the source host name? So the source, more often than not, is going to be Nessus. They're obviously the one running the scan, even though Joe does respond the one time. And then reason for the activity, intended/malicious. That's going to be intended, because they told us up here that they were doing the port scan. And then additional, has any response been sent back to the port scanner? Yes, it has. And that's this response right here where Joe responds. And then what flag was found after closing the alert? So now that we've looked at the alert, we should Is there a place to close this? Oh yeah, right up there. Complete investigation. So after looking at the investigation, what was the activity? Was it an actual incident, which is called a true positive, or was it a false positive? So it wasn't an actual problem. It just triggered an alert. And so the answer is B, and then it lets us, it kind of explains why. And so then we can go back to our dashboard and now we can close the alert. Now, a lot of times you would also leave a little note explaining why you did stuff, but I guess that was kind of what we did over here by answering the questions. And then with that, we get our flag. So we can copy that, paste it over here, hit submit. And with that, we are done with task number 6. Now I can zoom in so anybody watching on their phone can actually see again. And now last, but certainly not least, task number 7, the conclusion. It's basically just going to summarize what we learned. So with that, guys, we're all done. If you found the video helpful, please give it a like and subscribe. And you can also check out my memberships. Mark complete for that. Hit continue, continue, continue. And with that, you have finished the SOC Fundamentals room from TryHackMe.